Namaste. In this noisy world where people are constantly talking, comparing, chasing, sometimes it's not the noise outside, but the silence inside that slowly breaks us down. You see, it's not always the loud criticisms or the harsh words of others that damage us. Sometimes it's the habits we carry silently. Habits we don't talk about, don't confront, and don't realize, that slowly eat away our self-worth like termites on wood. Today, I want to take you on a reflective journey, a journey inward, where we uncover 5 silent habits that many of us practice unknowingly. Habits that silently kill our self-worth. Let's heal, let's grow, let's reclaim our inner peace. My dear friends, self-worth isn't something you find outside. It's something you build inside. And it begins when you silence these 5 silent habits: comparison, people-pleasing, negative self-talk, emotional avoidance, and dependence on validation. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not invisible. You are becoming, one silent step at a time. And in the words of the Bhagavad Gita, one must lift oneself by one's own self and not degrade oneself. The self alone is friend, and the self alone is the enemy. So today, choose to be a friend to yourself and watch your self-worth rise, not from noise, but from inner peace. Let's talk about something so subtle, so common, and yet so destructive that most people don't even realize it's happening: comparison. This habit doesn't come loudly knocking at your door. It sneaks in quietly, like a thief in the night. It creeps in when you open social media and see someone buying a new car, getting married, launching a business, or vacationing in the Maldives. And suddenly, without realizing, your mood drops. You were perfectly fine just a moment ago, but now a silent cloud of inadequacy settles over your heart. That, my friend, is the quiet poison of comparison. We are living in an age where everything is on display. People are putting their best moments forward. Filtered smiles, carefully edited videos, curated happiness. And yet, you begin to compare your unedited reality with someone else's highlight reel. Isn't that unfair? Imagine watching the final edited version of a movie and comparing it with your behind-the-scenes struggles. It's not only unfair, it's self-sabotage. Think about it. Have you ever scrolled through your phone and thought, why is their life so perfect while mine is stuck? Or how come they achieved success and I'm still figuring things out? These thoughts don't come with a warning, but they hurt deeply. Comparison doesn't just make you feel less, it makes you believe you're less. It eats away your self-worth from the inside, quietly, relentlessly. Let me give you a simple, real-life example. There was once a young girl who loved to paint. She would sit by the window every evening, capturing the sunsets with her brush and colors. One day, she stumbled upon an online artist's profile. Professional paintings, thousands of likes, people commenting in admiration. Slowly, she began to feel that her work was childish. She started criticizing her own strokes. Eventually, she stopped painting altogether. What changed? Her passion didn't fade. Her love for painting didn't die. But comparison told her she wasn't enough. And she believed it. This is what comparison does. It makes you question your own uniqueness. It makes you forget that you're running a race that no one else is even qualified to compete in. Because no one else has your story, your journey, your challenges, your resilience. You are not here to be better than others. You're here to be better than who you were yesterday. A flower does not bloom by looking at the flower next to it. It blooms because it was meant to. The rose never questions the sunflower. The lotus never competes with the lily. Each grows in its own time, its own season, in its own way. You too have your own timeline. Don't ruin it by trying to copy someone else's clock. One of the most dangerous things about comparison is that it often leads to a loss of gratitude. When you're busy focusing on what someone else has, you forget to cherish what you have. You could have a loving family, loyal friends, good health, a peaceful home, but you're too distracted by someone else's luxury car or dream vacation. And that's how happiness begins to slip away, because gratitude and comparison cannot coexist. Let me remind you of something powerful. The only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. If today you are more patient than you were last week, if you're more disciplined than you were last month, if you've healed even 1% more than last year, that's progress. That's victory. And that's worth celebrating. You don't need to outshine others to feel valuable. You just need to shine in your own way. Sometimes your shine is quiet, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's not recognized by others. That doesn't mean it's not real. Stop looking at people as competitors. Stop looking at people as Start seeing them as companions on their own unique paths. Celebrate their success without letting it become a mirror to your worth. When you see someone winning, don't ask, why not me? Instead ask, what can I learn? Or simply say, I'm happy for them. That mindset shift alone will save you years of pain. You are not behind, you are not failing, you are simply becoming stronger, becoming wiser, becoming apart, becoming stronger, becoming wiser, becoming more special, becoming you. So, the next time comparison tries to whisper in your ear, remind yourself, I am not here to compete, I am here to create, to grow, to evolve. And the best part? When you start walking your own path with confidence, self-worth naturally rises. It no longer needs external applause because it has internal peace. And that is the most powerful kind of self-worth there is. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't boast, but simply knows you are enough. You are worthy, just as you are. There is a silent battle that so many of us fight every day, often without ever saying a word. It's the battle of constantly saying yes, when deep down in our hearts, we want to say no. And we do it not because we're weak, not because we don't have opinions, but because we're afraid. Afraid of disappointing others, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being labeled as selfish, but in the process of always trying to please everyone else, we slowly forget how to honor ourselves. And that quietly and gradually starts killing our self-worth. Think about it. How many times have you agreed to go to a social gathering when all you really needed was some quiet time to rest and recharge? How often have you said yes to helping someone even when your plate was already overflowing with responsibilities? How many times have you let someone cross a boundary you were uncomfortable with just to keep the peace? At first, it may seem noble, being available, being agreeable, being accommodating. It even gets you applause. You're such a nice person, they say. You're so helpful. But inside, something starts to shift. That small voice inside you that used to speak up for your needs, your time, your energy, it grows quieter. You begin to lose touch with your own inner compass. And one day, you wake up feeling exhausted, resentful, maybe even invisible. When you say yes just to be liked, you give away a piece of your dignity. When you say yes just to avoid confrontation, you plant a seed of quiet frustration within yourself. And when this becomes a pattern, you no longer know where your own boundaries lie. You begin to live a life shaped not by your convictions, but by the expectations of others. And this is how the habit of people pleasing starts eroding your self-worth. Silently, but surely. Let me give you a real life example. There was a young professional named Ravi. He was smart, hardworking, and kind-hearted. At work, he would always say yes to every task assigned, even when it meant working late nights. He would never object. He feared if he said no, he would be seen as uncooperative. Over time, his energy dipped, his creativity dropped, and the worst part, people started expecting that overcommitment from him. No one asked if he was okay. No one noticed that he was running on fumes. Why? Because he never said no. He had trained the world to believe that he was always available. And that's the tragedy. When you don't value your time, neither will others. But this isn't just about work. It shows up in friendships, in families, in relationships. You agree to plans you don't enjoy. You stay silent when someone crosses a line. You keep giving and giving, hoping they'll see your worth. But people don't always recognize silent sacrifices. And every time you say yes when you want to say no, you abandon a small part of yourself. Self-worth begins where self-respect lives. And self-respect is deeply rooted in our ability to honor our boundaries. Say something to me. You don't need to be perfect. 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 It's saying, I matter too. Think of a tree. If a tree kept giving its branches to every passerby, it wouldn't be a tree for long. It would collapse. But when a tree stands tall, firm in its roots, it still offers shade, fruit, and beauty, but it does so from strength, not depletion. Likewise, when you learn to say no, you don't become less kind. You become more authentic. The fear of being misunderstood often keeps us trapped in this loop. But let me remind you, the people who truly value you will understand your no. They will respect your honesty. And the people who can't accept your boundaries were only benefiting from your lack of them. You don't owe anyone a yes that costs you your peace. And you certainly don't need to explain or defend every no you speak. No is a complete sentence. It is not rude. It is not unkind. It is powerful. When you start saying no where it's needed, something beautiful happens. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to hear your own voice louder than the noise of approval. You begin to live not to impress, but to express who you truly are. And that's where self-worth starts to grow, not from saying yes to everything, but from saying yes to yourself. Your time is valuable. Your energy is sacred. Your boundaries are beautiful. Protect them, guard them, honor them. The most fulfilling relationships you will ever have are the ones where you can be completely honest, where your yes means yes and your no means no. Not spoken out of guilt, not twisted by fear, but flowing from a place of self-respect. So the next time you feel that familiar pressure to agree when you don't want to, pause, breathe, ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear? And let your answer guide you. Because every time you honor your truth, you water the seed of self-worth inside you, and one day that seed grows into a life rooted in strength, not sacrifice. A life that no longer needs to be validated by saying yes to others, but by saying yes to yourself. There's a voice that speaks to you more than anyone else in the world. It doesn't belong to your parents, your friends, or your teachers. It belongs to you. It's that voice inside your head, the one that narrates your thoughts, the one that reacts when you make a mistake, the one that whispers silently when no one else is around. And that voice, it holds tremendous power. Because how you speak to yourself and how you see yourself shapes everything. Your confidence, your decisions, your relationships, your life. If that voice turns toxic, your self-worth slowly begins to crumble, and most people don't even realize it's happening. Let's be honest, we've all done it. We've all messed something up and immediately said, I'm so stupid. We've all looked in the mirror and found flaws instead of beauty. We've all made a mistake and told ourselves, I'm such a failure. These aren't harmless thoughts. They're seeds. Seeds that grow into insecurity, self-doubt, and shame. Every time you engage in negative self-talk, you reinforce a belief that you are not enough. And over time, that belief becomes your reality. Imagine you have a friend who follows you everywhere, and all they do is criticize you. They point out your every flaw. They remind you of every mistake. They compare you to everyone else and tell you why you don't measure up. Would you keep that friend around? Of course not. And yet, many of us allow that same behavior from ourselves. We say things to ourselves that we would never say to another person. Why? Because we believe that being hard on ourselves will make us better. But the truth is, cruelty doesn't build character. Compassion does. Let me give you an example. There was a young woman named Alina who always excelled in school. She was the perfect student, the one who always got A's and praise. But the moment she scored a B, her inner voice tore her apart. You're slipping, it said. You're not as smart as they think. She began to fear failure so deeply that she stopped trying new things. The fear wasn't coming from her teachers or her family. It was coming from her own mind. She was no longer learning because she loved to learn. She was performing to silence her inner critic. That voice had become her prison. Negative self-talk often starts in childhood. Maybe someone said something cruel to you once, and your mind replayed it so many times, it became a belief. Maybe you were constantly compared to others, and now you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. But here's the thing. Just because a thought exists in your mind doesn't mean it's true. And just because it feels familiar doesn't mean it's right. The good news is this. You can change that voice. You can retrain it. Just like you wouldn't let a stranger speak to your child with harsh, degrading words, you can learn to protect yourself from your own inner negativity. You can become your own best friend, your own coach, your own biggest supporter. But it begins with awareness. Next time you catch yourself saying, I'm not good enough, pause. Ask yourself, would I say this to someone I love? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't say it to yourself either. Replace that thought. Even if you don't believe the new thought yet, say it anyway. I am learning. I am doing my best. It's okay to make mistakes. Over time, your brain will adapt. The voice will change. and with it, your self-worth will rise. Think about how a plant grows. You get bumped, you get pushed, you get pulled, you get punished, you get hit, you get bounced, you get hit, you get bumped, you get pulled, you get punched, you get hit, you get bounced, you get hit, you get bumped, you get hit, you get punched, you get hit. It needs water, light, and care. It can't grow in a dark room with poison. Your self-worth is that plant. Negative self-talk is the poison. Positive, compassionate thoughts are the water and light. You have to choose what you feed yourself every day. One of the most powerful transformations in life is realizing that you don't have to be your own enemy. You don't have to wait for someone else to affirm you. You don't have to wait for someone else to affirm you. You don't have to prove your worth to the world just to feel okay about yourself. You can begin now, right where you are, by changing the way you speak to yourself. You are not your mistakes. You are not your flaws. You are not the negative thoughts that occasionally enter your mind. You are the observer of those thoughts, and you have the power to choose which ones to believe. Speak to yourself with the same kindness you would offer a child who's learning to walk, a friend who's going through a hard time, or a stranger who's doing their best. Your self-worth isn't something you earn, it's something you recognize. It's already there, buried under years of self-judgment and harsh words. All you have to do is peel those layers away and let it shine through. From today onward, be gentle with yourself. Encourage yourself. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Forgive your mistakes. And most importantly, speak to yourself with love. Because you are always listening. And what you hear becomes who you believe you are. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come from muscles or loud voices or winning arguments. It comes from the quiet courage of sitting with your own emotions, especially the uncomfortable ones. But unfortunately, most of us are taught to run from those feelings. We live in a world that rewards distractions. When you're sad, you scroll. When you're angry, you suppress. But emotions don't disappear just because you ignore them. They just hide deep inside you, waiting to be felt. And when you continue to avoid them, they begin to silently damage your self-worth. You see, when you deny your emotions, you send yourself a subtle message. My feelings don't matter. And if your feelings don't matter, you slowly begin to believe that you don't matter. It's not always a dramatic breakdown. It's often a quiet disconnection, a numbness, a restlessness, a feeling of not being fully alive. That's what emotional avoidance does. It doesn't just protect you from pain, it disconnects you from you. Let's take a real life example. Imagine a boy named Zion. Growing up, every time he cried, someone told him, "Boys don't cry, be strong." So he stopped crying. He stopped talking about his feelings. He became good at pushing things down. But as he grew older, he didn't know how to express love or fear or vulnerability. He struggled in relationships because he had built walls instead of bridges. And worst of all, he felt broken for even having emotions. He thought, something's wrong with me. But there was nothing wrong with Zion. He simply never learned how to feel without shame. Now think about yourself. How often do you allow yourself to really feel? To sit in sadness without trying to fix it? To acknowledge your anger without exploding? to accept your fear without judgment. Most people don't. And yet, emotions are not weaknesses, they're signals, they're teachers, they're messengers from the soul saying, something inside needs your attention. And when you listen, you heal. When you avoid, you postpone that healing. And sometimes you carry unhealed wounds for years without even realizing it. We live in a culture that glamorizes being okay all the time. People post perfect lives online, pretend to smile at work, say, I'm fine, even when they're falling apart inside. But no one is okay all the time. And pretending to be is the quickest way to lose touch with your authentic self, because you can't selectively numb emotions. If you shut off pain, you also dull your ability to feel joy. If you suppress sadness, you also block peace. Your emotional range is what makes you human. And your willingness to feel is what makes you strong. Think of emotions like waves in the ocean. You can't control when they come or how big they are, but you can learn to ride them, or how big they are, but you can learn to ride them. You don't have to drown, you just have to stop pretending the ocean doesn't exist. Sometimes healing looks like sitting quietly in your room and crying for no reason you can explain. Sometimes strength looks like admitting, I'm not okay right now, and that's okay. Sometimes self-worth is built not by action, but by acceptance. And here's the beautiful part. When you start allowing yourself to feel, you build trust with yourself. You build trust with yourself. You become your own safe space. You stop running. You stop pretending. You start living from a place of wholeness. You realize that being emotional isn't being too sensitive. It's being connected. And there's nothing more powerful than a person who is deeply connected to their inner world. They can love without fear. They can forgive without bitterness. They can face life without running. There's a story of a woman who lost a job. Instead of allowing herself to grieve, she jumped straight into finding the next opportunity. Everyone praised her hustle, but inside, she felt empty. Months later, she broke down over something small, and that's when she realized it wasn't about the little thing. It was all the unprocessed emotions she had carried since that day she never gave herself permission to feel. That moment taught her a valuable lesson. You can't outrun emotion. Nothing, they always catch up. But when they do, you can either greet them with fear or with compassion. Start making space in your life for emotional honesty. Journal what you're feeling. Talk to someone you trust. Sit with your feelings instead of fighting them. And most importantly, remind yourself that your emotions are valid. Every single one of them. You don't need a logical reason to cry. You don't need to justify your hurt. You don't need to be strong all the time. The strongest people aren't the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who feel deeply and still choose to show up. They face life head on. They don't hide from their humanity. And that's what true self-worth is. It's knowing that all parts of you, even the broken ones, even the emotional ones, are worthy of love. So from today, stop avoiding your emotions. Welcome them. Learn from them. Let them guide you back home to yourself. Because you are not too much. You are not too emotional. You are exactly as you were meant to be, fully human, deeply feeling, and incredibly worthy. Validation is something every human being naturally seeks. From the time we are children, We look to our parents to clap when we take our first steps, to smile when we draw a messy picture, to applaud when we get a good grade, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to be appreciated. But somewhere along the way, many of us fall into the trap of depending too heavily on external validation. We begin to tie our self-worth to the opinions, reactions, and approval of other people. And the danger of that is subtle but real. When your value depends on someone else's voice, you forget how to hear your own. Think about how many decisions you've made, not because they were right for you, but because you thought they would please someone else. Maybe you wore something just because others liked it. Maybe you chose a career path to make your family proud. Maybe you posted a photo and then spent the next hour checking for likes and comments, feeling anxious if they didn't come in fast enough. All of this points to the silent habit of seeking validation, and over time, it chips away at your self-worth without you even realizing it. There's a story about a young girl named Anya who loved writing poetry. It was her escape, her joy, her way of understanding the world. One day, she decided to share a piece online. She waited eagerly for feedback, but hours passed and no one reacted. Her heart sank. Suddenly, she doubted herself. Maybe I'm not that good, she thought. She stopped writing for a while, not because she lost her love for it, but because her self-belief had become dependent on a few digital responses. That's what happens when we outsource our sense of worth. Our passions begin to feel pointless if they're not praised. We forget that the value of something doesn't increase just because it's popular. Some of the most beautiful things in life, like sunsets or silence, don't need applause to be meaningful. The problem with relying on validation is that it's never stable. People's opinions change, their attention shifts. One day they cheer you on, the next day they criticize you. If your confidence is built on their approval, your self-worth will constantly rise and fall like a yo-yo. But you were never meant to be a puppet, moved by strings of praise. You were meant to stand in your truth, firm, grounded, and whole, whether the world notices or not. Look around you. So many people are performing instead of living. They're performing happiness, success, even kindness, because deep down they believe that being accepted is more important than being authentic. But the truth is, no amount of likes can make up for the emptiness of living a life that isn't yours. Authenticity may not always get you standing ovations, but it will give you peace. And peace is a far better measure of self-worth than applause. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine a musician who plays from the heart. One day, there's a big crowd and everyone claps and cheers. Another day, he plays in a quiet park with no one around. If he finds joy only when there's a crowd, then he's not playing from love, he's performing for approval. But if he can play with the same passion whether or not anyone's listening, that's true freedom. That's true confidence. Self-worth grows when you stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, do I like who I'm becoming? The moment you start looking inward instead of outward, you begin to build something no one can take from you, a foundation of inner strength. You start to trust your decisions, speak your truth, and live your values. Not for attention, but from alignment. And you start to understand that for all of us, there is no more value than vitality. You start to trust your decisions, speak your truth, and live your values. Not for attention, but for alignment. Of course, we all want to be appreciated, but appreciation should be a cherry on top, not the cake. The moment you realize that your voice matters, even if no one echoes it, that your journey is valid, even if no one celebrates it, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop needing permission to feel proud of yourself. From today, try this. Create something without posting it. Achieve something without announcing it. Today, you have no excuse to be unapologetic. Achieve something without announcing it. Today, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop posting it, achieve something without announcing it. Today, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop posting it, achieve something without announcing it. Feel good about yourself without telling the world why. Not because you want to hide, but because you want to grow strong enough to not need constant affirmation. Learn to clap for yourself in empty rooms. Learn to validate your own feelings, decisions, and efforts. And slowly you'll discover something remarkable. You are enough, not because they said so, but because you finally believe it. Your worth doesn't live in their eyes, their words, or their likes. It lives in your heart, in your choices, in your quiet confidence. And once you begin to root your identity in that space, the noise of the world starts to fade. The silence becomes empowering. And you realize validation is sweet, but self-worth is sacred. There is a quiet kind of self-betrayal that happens when you constantly shrink yourself to make others comfortable. When you hide your ideas in meetings so you don't sound too bold. When you laugh at jokes that hurt just to avoid being labeled too sensitive. When you lower your voice, dull your shine, suppress your truth, all because you're afraid that being fully you might be too much for the people around you, for the people you love, for the people you need to live your life. That when you live your life for the people you care about, you create very little enjoyment in experience, in fun, in meaning, in connection, in fear, in envy of the people you care about. All of these are painful and painful ends at what we do. This habit doesn't scream, it doesn't leave bruises, but it slowly chips away at your sense of worth, your sense of identity, and your inner peace. Think about how many times you've held back. Maybe you wanted to share an opinion, but you stayed silent, worrying what others might think. Maybe you had an idea that could have changed the course of something important, but you told yourself, who am I to speak up? And maybe somewhere along the way, you started to believe that your voice didn't matter, your dreams weren't valid, your presence wasn't powerful enough to take up space. This is not humility. This is fear wrapped in politeness. It's the kind of fear that teaches you to be smaller than you are, just to be liked, accepted, or tolerated. But you were not born to be tolerated. You were born to be seen, to be heard, to be felt. You were born to take up space with grace, to speak truth with courage, and to live a life that reflects who you really are, not who the world wants you to pretend to be. There's a story of a man named Omar who was passionate about art. His sketches were brilliant, unique, full of life. But he was raised in an environment where art wasn't seen as valuable. He was constantly told, that's just a hobby, or real men focus on business, not paintbrushes. So he tucked his sketchbooks away, he took a corporate job, he wore a suit every day, smiled at meetings, learned to speak the language of productivity. Outwardly he succeeded, but inwardly he felt invisible because the real Amar, the passionate artist, the dreamer, the expressive soul was locked away. This is what happens when we dim our inner light for too long. At first, we think we're just being practical. with just adjusting, just compromising. But eventually, it stops being a choice and becomes a habit. We stop showing up as ourselves and we start performing. We live for approval, not for alignment. And when you live that way for too long, you begin to lose touch with who you really are. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect your relationships, it weakens them. Because when people love a version of you that you've watered down, they don't really know you. And deep down, you'll always wonder, would they still love me if I stopped pretending? That question will haunt every smile, every conversation, every connection. True self-worth isn't about being liked. It's about being real. It's about knowing that you are enough, exactly as you are, and you don't have to twist yourself into someone else's mold just to be accepted. Think of the people you admire most. They're not the ones who played it safe and quiet. They're the ones who dared to show up fully, who spoke truthfully, lived boldly, and stayed rooted in their values even when it was uncomfortable. That's the kind of life that inspires. That's the kind of life that makes a difference. And let's be clear, taking up space doesn't mean being arrogant or overpowering. It means honoring your worth. It means knowing that your ideas matter, your dreams matter, your boundaries matter, your personal comfort matter, your boundaries matter, your personal comfort matter, your boundaries 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 matter. It means showing up with the full power of your presence, even if your voice trembles, even if not everyone agrees. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to be authentic. When you walk into a room with the quiet confidence of someone who accepts themselves completely, people feel it. It doesn't need to be announced. It's in your posture, your choices, your energy. It's in the way you no longer apologize for existing. From today, start noticing the moments when you're shrinking, the moments when you bite your tongue out of fear, not kindness, the moments when you lower your standards so others won't feel uncomfortable. And in those moments, gently remind yourself, I am allowed to be here. I am allowed to feel. I am allowed to speak. I am allowed to take up space. Because you are not a burden. You are a blessing. And the world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs more people who have the courage to be. So write the book, even if no one reads it yet. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. Wear what feels like you, even if it turns heads. Live fully, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because when you stop shrinking, you give others permission to do the same. And that's how change begins. Not by demanding space, but by owning it being you. You are enough. You are worthy. Not for who you pretend to be, but for who you already are. Stand tall, speak freely, take up your space in the world. It's yours, always has been. Ask ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT, Code Dynamite, ask ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT,